Brian, co-host Brian. All right.
Recording.
All right. Great. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the APIPP Fall Partner Meeting. And this is actually our fourth Zoom partner meeting. Who knew on Earth Day 2020 that this was going to be sort of our new normal for a while? So I dearly wish that I could be with all of you and that we could all be together. We could share our stories in the morning. We could share our thoughts about the coming winter. We could stop over a cup of coffee and say hello. And so that's not happening yet, but hopefully this Zoom presentation will give you some way to connect with colleagues. Please use the chat liberally today and get a chance to say hello to your friends and message back and forth as we go. Just a brief introduction. There we go. A brief introduction to what we're going to do today. As I said, we're at the point where we're trying to pull together our summer data, and we're really excited about sharing some of our field results with you. We also have Karen Strong on the phone today. She's going to be leading APIPP's next strategic planning process, and so she's going to talk with you about that. We will take a little bit of break in between before coming back for our feature presentations. We're going to hear first the results of what's AWI and the Watercraft Inspection Steward Program for the season. And then Michale Glennon is going to give us a presentation on the pathways of invasion, particularly related to recreation. And then Sawyer Gardner is going to give us a presentation on emerald ash borer biocontrols. I've popped the agenda in the chat, so hopefully that will be a way that you can keep track of where we're at here today. And also, during our break, I'll be sharing a slide deck of slides that our partners have provided about their updates. And Zach, I think you've got a link to that you can post in the chat. So that's also uploaded on our website. So with no further ado on that, I want to go right into introducing who's on the APIPP team. And I think many of you know me. I'm Tamara Van Ryn, and I'm the APIPP Program Manager. And today we have most of our team with us, I think, except for some of our seasonals. Becca Bernacki, who is our Terrestrial Coordinator, Emily Bell Dinan, who is our Education and Outreach Coordinator, Brian Green, our Aquatic Coordinator, Zach Simic, our Conservation and GIS Analyst. Adelia Baker is one of our summer stewards, and she's with us until next week. And then Megan Grega finished up her season with us, and we were delighted that she's able to be a stream bank technician for TNC through the fall. So great APIPP team, and a hello again to all of you on the phone. It looks like we've got about 45 of you on the phone, and I wish we could go around the room and have you all introduce yourselves, but that's really hard to do on Zoom. So again, please use the chat liberally today. So I did have a quick poll question though, that I wanted to see just who is on the phone today. Let's see if I can launch my poll. So just a little question, where are you calling? Are you here from local government today? Are you one of our great volunteers? Oh, lots of folks chiming in. I love these partners. You're from everywhere. It's great. All right. Looks like a lot of lake associations and other partners and agencies. Let's see, just share the results up for a moment. Emily Bell, are you seeing the results pop up? You seeing them? No. Yes, Brian's seeing them. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll stop sharing those poll results. There we go. All right. Well, it's always nice to know where you're at, and certainly welcome to all of you today. There we go. So I wanted to just do a quick overview of our highlights from summer of 2021 and our education and outreach highlights, and then turn it over to Becca and Brian to dive into our terrestrial and aquatic work. So I like to think of this year as our summer of from treetops to lake bottoms. And we started, there's a picture of Becca in the upper corner, actually helping DEC treat hemlock, woolly, adelgid in the Lake George area. We were able to move purple loosestrife biocontrols. We were able to have our team going out and doing aquatic surveys. We were very fortunate to have our professional crew from Invasive Plant Control doing terrestrial work and the professional crew from Adirondack Research doing our aquatic work. You're going to hear more from about each of those programs in a little bit. We also started during our little bit of pre-meeting chat about jumping worms. We started a new invasive jumping worm monitoring program. And we also continued our work to do invasive species control work at every single DEC campground in the Adirondacks. And what was actually, I think, the highlight for all of this summer was having a chance to get out and work with our partners, whether I see many of you on the phone, whether we were at Caroga Lake or Scroon Lake or Lake George. We just had a great time being able to get to meet you, especially after last summer. And I want to thank the Lake George Association for hosting us one morning on their floating classroom. It was a great summer also for outreach and education. Thanks to Emily Bell Dinan for the great original artwork and putting together these posters and the brochures. And thanks to all of you. We see these as communal property. So anyone who, we so appreciate anyone who was able to get these out and distribute them this summer. We had over 40,000 brochures and over 2,700 posters that went out to all of you. And we also distributed them to businesses all across the Adirondacks. A big shout out to AWI for getting them to every boat inspection station. And we also had them in every DEC kiosk. So if you are interested in these for next summer, Emily Bell will have some information going out. If you want them again next summer, please let us know and let Emily Bell know. If you want large quantities of them, that would be beyond our ability to print them. We can hook you up with a printer. If you want 10,000 copies, we can make sure that happens and get you connected with someone for that. We also have the PDFs available on our website. You can download them and take them anywhere to print. We really see these, as I said, as a community resource. We also started doing boot brush stations last summer, and Emily Bell was continuing with that this year at TNC Preserves and a new partnership with the Ausable River Association, tying these in with some of their wader wash stations. So that's very exciting. We had a great summer doing education programs, and thank you to all of you who came to those. We really look forward to hopefully getting outside with you next summer. We did our first outdoor in-person field training with the Lake George Land Conservancy just a couple weeks ago, and that was great to finally be out and about. Many of you have already been thinking about what events you're going to plan for next summer, and our staff would love to have a chance to connect with you. We do have a limited amount of time and how many places we can go. So reach out to Emily Bell early if you know you have a date on your calendar and you're like, we want you guys to come to this. Just please let us know. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Becca Bernacki, and she's going to give our terrestrial program. And let's see, I can remember how. There we go. You're up, Becca.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. It's so great to see everyone. I am going to get us into our summer field results by talking about our terrestrial season here. So first, I'd be very remiss to start this presentation without extending a huge thank you to all of our contractors, our seasonal staff, our volunteers, and all of our other partners. All of the work I'm presenting today is a result of their hard work and dedication. So a big thank you to all of those folks. And you can see our terrestrial crew that I'm going to talk about here in a second, working hard on Whiteface Highway on a cold and foggy day, hand pulling some plants. It's not easy work, but it's important work. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about our terrestrial early detection and rapid response crew. Here we go. Sorry, slide was taking a second to advance there. LREDR crew. And this is a contracted crew for, as Tamara mentioned, they're contracted through invasive plant control. They're led by a New York State licensed pesticide applicator, who's Richard there in the gray, with 3 apprentices. From left to right, we have Zachary, JC, and Nicole. These fine folks were with us for about 14 weeks this summer, from June 21st to September 22nd. And over that time, they traveled roads and state forest preserves and private properties, and were able to assess over 1,700 sites. Of those 1,700 sites, they treated about 500 of them. The bulk of the work this crew does is chemical treatments, but they also do mechanical work and a little bit of biological control work for us as well. Of the 1,700 sites that they did assess, 500 no longer had the target invasive plant present, which really highlights the success of this program. In addition to treating invasive species, as we mentioned, on road right-of-ways and forest preserve lands and private properties, this crew also does some pretty important work along the Veterans Memorial Highway, where they hand pull some invasive species to protect the rare, threatened, endangered species in the alpine habitat. And they removed 25 contractor bids of invasive species this year from those areas. The second branch of our terrestrial crew here are our invasive species management stewards. And Tamara introduced these folks to you a bit a minute ago, but we have Megan on the top here and Adelia on the bottom. And collectively, they surveyed about 38 New York State DEC campgrounds and 135 recreational access points. And they're not only surveying these areas, they're also doing some mechanical treatments as well. In fact, they collectively hand-pulled over 15,000 plants. They also surveyed over 50 sites throughout the region for jumping worms to determine the extent of that species throughout our region. They inspected our emerald ash borer traps and changed the lures on those. And we'll talk about those traps in a bit later here. They also surveyed grids for spotted lanternfly and tree of heaven following the IMAP invasive protocol, and much, much more. So as we talked about, those invasive species management stewards do a lot of work at our New York State DEC campground. So I want to pull up this figure that shows some of the work they've done since 2012. So the axis on the left there is the number of plants removed, and that is shown by the green bars. So as you can see, in 2012, they removed almost 70,000 plants, and that blue star means they didn't have time to get to all the plants to pull them. Compare that to this year, where we pulled under 15,000 garlic mustard plants. So you can see, it's a pretty successful program. If you look at that bar chart, kind of fluctuating across the top, that is a percent of campgrounds invaded. So you can see it fluctuates over time. Early on, we maybe weren't able to get to all the campgrounds, so it was a lower percentage. The first couple of years it went up. We reached our all-time low last year of 39%, and it bumped up again this year. So we had, I think, 3 campgrounds that went from uninvaded to reinvaded, but there were only a handful of plants present at those campgrounds. And that's why this work's really, really important. If we can take care of those infestations early, we prevent them from getting bigger and causing larger problems. The third group of folks I'm going to talk about today are our Knotweed Management Partnership volunteers. This is a program that we adopted last year as a pilot program. It was a program that was created in 2008, I'm sorry there folks, by a group of concerned volunteers down in the inlet region. And these folks really go out and survey for knotweed and gather landowner permissions. Collectively, they gathered about 85 unique landowner permissions this year, which allowed us to contract with a certified applicator and treat about 115 sites. Of the sites we had permission to access, 15 no longer had knotweed present. Like I said, this program began in 2008, and that really highlights the success of this program. So big thank you to our volunteers for that. Now, we don't have time today to get into every species, so we're going to talk about a few notable species that are important and we feel folks should be updated on. And the first of those is Japanese stiltgrass. So Japanese stiltgrass was unfortunately first detected within our prison this year in September. And a big thank you to the private landowner who saw this species and reported it to us. To highlight the teamwork that went into this, this was reported to us by a private landowner, then myself and one of our stewards and some folks from the Lake George Land Conservancy went out and surveyed it. The next week, we were able to get our EDRR crew out there and chemically and mechanically treat it. So great teamwork went into treating this. You can see what happens when Japanese stiltgrass becomes a problem in that lower picture. So this is just a dense mat at that location of this Japanese stiltgrass. I'm not going to get into a lot of ID today, but the species is identifiable in that top right picture by an off-center, slightly silver midrib. And if you see this species, please report it to us. As we said, we only have one known infestation in the park, in the prism, and we'd like to keep this species at bay for a bit longer. The second species I'm going to talk about today is Japanese tree lilac. This is an ornamental species. It's the only lilac that forms a tree-like form. It can also be a large shrub. You can see these really showy white flowers a little bit later in the season than our native lilacs. This species is still available for sale at our local nurseries. However, we are seeing increasing evidence that it's able to escape cultivation and form invasive stands, especially in riparian areas. So our partners, as well as our stewards and our EDRR crew, did some pretty intensive surveys for the species this year, and they found 5 naturalized either trees or stands, and these are cases where those trees are growing outside of where they were planted. The largest infestation we know about in the prism is along the Ausable River and spans about 4 miles. So it's a pretty large infestation, and it's definitely a species that we have some concerns with. Next species I'm going to talk about is Tree of Heaven. Tree of Heaven is a concern to us due to the threat of spotted lanternfly. This species is the host plant for that forest pest. It does inhabit and land on other trees and feed off of other trees, but its host plant is Tree of Heaven. So if you look at this figure here, we have the number of sites on the left axis and the years on the right. So in 2017, we had 2 infestations known. There's no management underway. We were able to perform some outreach the next year and get into contact with one of those landowners who allowed treatment. Late last year, we did find another infestation. At that time, it was kind of late in the season to survey it. So this year we went out and we did a lot of outreach to the Tree of Heaven landowners that we knew about and we knew about through IMAP invasives. So now we have about 10 known infestations, as you can see in that figure. We were able to treat 7 of them this year, so that's a pretty big success on our part. And I will say, you know, it shows 10. That doesn't mean that we have 10 unique sites. Some of these sites are all located on one property. But this is another species that if you see it, please report it to us. And all these species I'm talking about, if you do want more information on identification, you can visit our website or view some of our previously recorded webinars. A lot of this information is in those. I believe this is the last plant I'm going to talk about today, and it's giant hogweed. I know everyone knows what giant hogweed is, and we all have concerns about that phytotoxic sap. So we have 16 historic sites throughout our prism. As you can see, kind of same thing, number of sites on the left axis, years on the right. So comparing this year to last year, we had 6 sites with plants present compared to 4 last season. One thing I do want to note is that one of those sites where those plants kind of reemerged after not being seen for several years, that landowner had some work done in the area, so the land was regraded. So what we think may have happened is that the seeds were present in the soil, but they're too deep to germinate. And then that regrading really brought them to the surface, spread them to a slightly new area, and those seeds were able to germinate. And I don't say this to say anything about the landowner. You know, the landowner did everything fine and they saw it and they reported it to us. But I tell you this so that if you are doing some work on your property and it's in an area where you had invasive species in the past and you treated them, keep an eye on it. Disturbance often brings these things back up, and it's way easier to treat things while they're small and re-emerging than, you know, waiting until they get big and become a problem again. The good news is 62.5% of our historic giant hogweed populations are free of giant hogweed at this point. Getting into some of our forest pests here, emerald ash. So talking about emerald ash borer, I mentioned before that our seasonal stewards did monitor some traps for us. We had 5 traps throughout the region. 4 of those were kind of centered in the cardinal directions around that new known infestation in the scroon. And then we also had 1 at our Bocat River Preserve in Willsboro. We did unfortunately have a positive finding on our traps in Bolton Landing. There's also a new landowner report still in Warren County in the Johnsburg Bakers Mills area. In addition, Franklin County Soil and Water Conservation District does have a positive confirmed finding in IMAP invasives near Chateauguay. In addition to ours and our partners' trapping efforts, we at APIPP also established 5 monitoring and managing ash plots. And these are plots that we set up in an area before emerald ash borer has come through in our case. We're going to monitor them annually for signs and symptoms of emerald ash borer. Once emerald ash borer does come through and starts killing those trees, it'll let us know when we reach a threshold of percent mortality. That signals to us that we can go out and search the broader area for lingering ash. And lingering ash are ash that remain alive in the wake of emerald ash borer and are thought to have some genetic resistance to the pest. And if we do find those trees, we can report them to U.S. Forest Service, and U.S. Forest Service does have a great breeding program where they're breeding genetically resistant ash at this point. Our other forest pest, unfortunately, is Hemlock, wily, adelgid. So in 2021, we completed our second year of treatments on Dome Island with our partners from the Lake George Land Conservancy. Dome Island is an approximately 15-acre island in the center of Lake George. You can see that red star on the map there. In total, we have treated 857 trees with a basal bark spray of imidacloprid and dinotefuran. So if you look at that map of Dome Island, the green dots are what were treated in 2020. We treated 342 trees. This year we treated 515 trees, and those are those purpley dots. And it's important to note here that imidacloprid, one of the pesticides we used, is long-term and will protect those trees for about 5 to 7 years. In addition to the basal bark treatments, this year, you can see those yellow triangles. We were able to perform imidacloprid injections of about 71 trees. So thanks to our partners at Lake George for their help with that. The last thing I'm going to talk about today is not something that APIPP's been working on, but some of our partners are working on. Box tree moth is a forest pest that can damage and kill boxwood plants. The caterpillars will defoliate the plants, and the larvae will consume the bark when the leaves are gone and potentially girdle those boxwood plants. Unfortunately, between August 2020 and April 2021, a nursery in Ontario, Canada, shipped some boxwoods that may have been infested with this pest, and USDA APHIS was able to confirm an infestation in Niagara County this year. On May 26th of this year, APHIS did order a federal order to halt the importation of the plant from Canada. So this isn't something that's been found in our area or in our prism, but it's something we're aware of and we want you folks to be aware of and keeping an eye out for as well. And with that, I will pass the torch to Brian.
Good morning, everyone. Bear with me a second as I request control. Okay, so this is a picture from Lake Flower here in Saranac Lake, and I rode by it this morning on my bike with my son as I took him to school, and it looked very different. So it's kind of hard on these cold and chilly mornings to think about those summers when we were out there boating and swimming. So the seasons are marching on, but it's been a great summer. This was my first summer in the Adirondacks, and I really enjoyed getting out on over 24 lakes and seeing what spectacular aquatic resources we have. So this is an overview of our AIS monitoring. Here at APIPP, it is all about partnerships, and really we work to be the central locus of trying to bring together all our different partners, our professional early detection team, our lake associations, the lake protectors, and the groups that participate in our lake management tracking. And this is really a good example of the sum is greater than the individual parts. We have over 10,000 lakes in the Adirondacks. No group or organization can do this by themselves. So it's really important that we all work together, and APIPP can serve as a central hub of reporting and collecting information and data. So our volunteer program is called Lake Protectors. It started in 2002. So this is actually our 20th season, incredibly successful for any program to last 20 seasons. So special thank you to all the partners and volunteers who have been with us the whole entire way, like this picture of Debbie down in the bottom. I get to stand on the shoulders of giants, these past coordinators and people who have been doing this. So it was an honor to get to see all this great work that people have been putting in for 2 decades now. So like anything that's 20 years old, we kind of, did an update, tried to make sure everything was still going good. So we updated some of our websites. You can see a new web page with the lake protectors information. We updated our volunteer manual and had some awesome, great new graphical brochures and things that you saw that Emily Bell designed and we put out there. We also had a new online sign-up map where we had over 101 lakes adopted. So this was a way for people to see all the different lakes in the region and where people are monitoring. So that was very successful way of displaying information. And we also created an email newsletter that featured our volunteers, talked about what was going on in the different season, and highlighted both invasive and native plants that people were seeing as a way to keep that engagement up with our partners and continue that ongoing education, because learning about both aquatic invasive plants and native plants is not a one-time thing in a training, it's a lifetime of learning, and getting out and seeing these plants, how they change over the season is really pretty fun and pretty unique. Our early detection team is our professional crew that we contract with Adirondack Research to go out and survey lakes across the region. We use a rotating approach across the Adirondacks, and where we break it into 3 big regions. And this year, Adirondack Research returned to the southeast area, which is made up of the Sacandaga, Hudson, and Lake Champlain watersheds. And they were able to go out and monitor 51 lakes, which is a highly successful year. So we're very thankful to Ezra and all his crew, like Laura and Mark out here. You can see this picture right there. They're going out in either motorboats or canoes, cruising through the littoral zone, doing visual surveys and rake tosses to look for aquatic plants. They also survey for some of our aquatic invertebrates like the spiny water flea and Asian clam, doing sieves and plankton toes. And so this is takes a lot of effort and takes a lot of time. It takes a keen eye to go out there, and they really do a great job. And they are busy finishing up their data analysis, and there'll be a report coming that many people will be able to look at. One of the key features in this report that people enjoy is seeing the maps of where aquatic invasive species are. So this map on the left of East Caroga shows the lake, and these areas outlined in red. The different colors of red show where the invasive species are and at what different densities. The one on the right is an example of one of our Adirondack Lake, showing some of the biobase, the vegetation data on it, so the height of vegetation in the water column. A new feature this year will be, it might be a little bit hard to see on this one, but you'll be able to see the track of the boat that the boats went through, their GPX track. So that's going to be another useful piece of information to allow people to see where they looked. Some of these lakes, there are areas that are maybe too shallow because of the time of year, or sometimes there's nesting loons or other things that prevent the team from getting into some of these crosshatched areas. So that information allows you to see, like, oh, maybe some local volunteers or people can go out and check that area at a more appropriate time. So this report will be coming out later this year, and it's something that it's a good resource for all of our people who care about lakes. Another interesting thing that we focus on with the Adirondack Research, because they surveyed this area in 2018, we specifically chose some lakes to resurvey in 2021. So we are going to be able, over the winter time, to do some analysis and look at what has happened to invasive plants in those lakes. What happened to the number of occurrences, what is going on with the density. Some of these lakes had different management going on. So this will be a good data insight to compare 2021 to 2018. So overall, so far we've have 130 reports from AIS surveys on lakes across the region. You can see this breakdown: 51 from our ED team, 45 from partners like lake associations or different agencies or nonprofits, and then 34 from volunteers. So 130 surveys on 109 lakes, a very good turnout. APIPP collects this all into a database to show the over 400 some lakes that we've monitored in these 20 years. And so it's really important that if you haven't submitted a report to us, that you can get that information in, so we are able to be that collective repository to show where we are looking, where invasive species are distributed. So get in contact with me if you haven't already submitted a survey report this year. Some quick highlights of there's 130 reports observed. Fortunately, we had no tier 1 species observed. So our tier 1 species are ones that are not yet in the region. So these are ones like hydrilla, quagga mussels, and rusty crayfish. We did have some reports of some of these tier 1 species in the from our boat stewards, and hopefully Eric will probably talk about this. So the importance of our boat stewards of preventing these introductions is key. There also were no new reports of water chestnut in our Adirondack lakes. And overall, out of those 130 reports, 22% of them observed in AIS. So it's important to remember that the majority of the time that people are going out, they are not seeing aquatic invasive species. And even on lakes that are invaded, we do have people that go out and maybe they don't see it in that section or they don't see it at that time. So really we are looking for something that is difficult to detect. And so that's why having more people out on the water, more people searching and looking for this is critically important. So if you didn't join us in 2021, we hope that you can come and join us in 2022. So that was our early detection program, where we're trying to do this census and survey across the whole entire lake. We then have another program that's called Lake Management Tracker. So these are for lakes that we know are invaded by a certain invasive species, and they're generally a group or an organization that is doing management of this. And so this is our program that allows them to see, how is that management going? How effective is our money being used, and what are the results of this? So this is the 4th year of the program. We held 3 trainings for different lake associations to do this. Here is a photo of me teaching a group out at Moody Pond here in Saranac Lake. They're not looking at their phones because they're bored by me. They're looking at their phones because that's how they use an app, a Survey 123 app on ArcGIS to collect the data. And we had 7 lakes in 2021 participate, with the volunteers collecting over 1,600 observations. So essentially what we do is we grid out the lake. They have these monitoring points that they repeatedly go to year after year, the same location, and they're looking at the abundance and of invasive species and also of native species, and are they present or absent, and then what is the density of them. And the real key from those 1,600 observations is that we are able to turn that data into knowledge, and we're able to use this knowledge to inform the management strategies that organizations are taking. So here is a graph showing an example from Upper Paradox Lake, the upper basin, and comparing 2019 to 2021. And this data has indicated that that Eurasian water milfoil is increasing in where it is and also in its abundance. And so 2 days ago, I met with the Paradox Lake Association. We're looking at this data, and now we're reevaluating what is their management strategy. What is the best thing that they can do to reach their management goals? And so this data becomes really useful. It's not just an academic process. It's something that they're able to use to adjust their management of the lake. But most importantly, I want to say thank you to all our amazing lake association, our volunteers, our partners, our boat stewards, our AWI. I had a fantastic summer of going out and getting to meet so many people, getting tours on these beautiful lakes. And really, this is a collective effort where we're all working together. And, it is, these great stewards, these communities and people that care about our lakes that really makes the difference. And so APIPP, we are proud to partner with everyone for these past 2 decades, and we hope we can continue to partner with you for the decades ahead to really protect our aquatic resources from invasive species.
Thanks,
I don't know,
Brian. Much appreciated. I need to turn the remote control over to Karen. There you go. Karen, you should be able to have the remote control now.
Great, thanks. And does that mean I can stop sharing for a moment? Do I control that, or someone else has to do
I think you, yeah, hold on just a second. So just a quick minute. I want to give Brian and Becca a very big thanks for that quick overview. And you can probably, many of you are sitting there with all kinds of questions for Brian and Becca. And I wish that we had all morning to be able to talk about their work, because we could certainly do all of that. I do encourage you to use the chat, and we have some time at the very end of today to have a lot of questions back and forth. You can also individually email Brian and Becca, and we will be having partner roundtables in February. So we'll have a roundtable on February 8th to talk about terrestrial species, and on February 10th to talk about aquatic species. And that'll also be a chance for all of you to share your work. That's not where we're talking, but where we get to hear a lot about your work. So I do want to introduce now Karen Strong, and Karen is the principal of Strong Outcomes. She's got a long history in conservation and has worked in a variety of roles in New York State. And we are delighted that Karen is actually working with APIPP to help lead our strategic planning process. And so Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm hoping that you still have screen control.
Well, we'll figure that out.
Okay.
But I want to stay off, I want the slides down for a minute, because what I want to invite you all to do, just for a moment, is to turn your cameras on. If you are in front of a camera, just to turn your cameras on, look around at the room, if you can make your screen big enough to see everybody, and just look at everybody and kind of wave hello and say hi. You know, we're in such a disconnected time when we can't be together in the same room. And I know folks miss that. As we did interviews, people talk about that a lot. So let's just take a opportunity to use this tool the way that we can to see each other and say hello and welcome each other into the space. Thanks for that. Okay, so as Tamara said, I'm a consultant working with APIPP. I'm delighted to be doing this. I'm very excited about the work. I love conservation, and I love the people part of conservation, which is kind of the core work, right? Science is necessary, but not sufficient. Conserve nature. The people are a really important part of it. And you guys are an amazing example of how you can work for a long time bringing lots of people together in order to address a really complex, large-scale problem like invasive species in the Adirondacks. So before we get started in the slides, I also wanted to do a little bit of polling with you, but not with the Zoom polls. I'm going to do it in a slightly different way. I'm going to share a link in the chat, because I want to know what you all think about strategic planning. So I'm sharing a Google Doc link in the chat. And so once there, when you click on that, what's going to happen is your web browser is going to open up to a slide that I'm going to pull up so you can, well, I'm actually not going to do that quite yet. So if you are not able to pull it up, some of you are on the phone, so that might be a challenge, but if you're not able to pull it up and you want some help, just use the raise hand function under reactions and we'll see if we can help you. Looks like quite a few of you are in here, 23 or so. Click on that chat, and then if you want help getting in, just use the reactions to raise your hand or indicate somehow that you need some help. All right, so we got 28 folks in there. So what we're gonna do, I see some of you have already started, is we're looking at a spectrogram where I want you to indicate your experience with strategic planning. Some of you have done a lot of this before. Some of you, this may be very new. So there's some stars in the corner of the slide. Some of you have found those. So just click on one. Someone might take yours. Just find one that's your own, and then take that star and stick it on the spectrogram where you find yourself. So we're ranging from none, this is my first experience with plans and planning, some I've read some plans, but this is my first process, or quite a bit, I've read plans and participated in one or more processes. So I'm going to share this, and I know that gets confusing for folks because this is shared to the Zoom screen. Some of you may not be seeing it shared because you're still looking at your web browser. And that's fine. We'll make sure we're all in the right place eventually. I'm seeing 39. Most of you are in there. If you're not, hopefully you can see the screen. One of the funny things about this is that sometimes the stars turn upside down and they get big and they get strange shapes, and that's okay. We're just trying to figure out where everybody is in this spectrum of planning experience. So I'm seeing a lot of, I'm seeing a good spread, you know, some quite a bit, some in the middle, some, this is new for you. All right, so if you're in the web browser, you should be able to see the changes happening. And if you're not, hopefully you can see the Zoom screen. Is anybody not seeing this? Just indicate it with a raised hand or a hand wave. Okay, so you are seeing it. So you can see the spread. There's a big range of people's experience with the strategic planning. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And so the next slide, you can either go forward one if you can see it, or I can share a new link as well. There's too much traffic to participate. Oh my goodness. And you may have agency partners who can't use Google Office products. Well, if you're in that situation, you can watch the slide in the Zoom window and imagine where you are. So I see you're all getting the hang of it here. So how do you feel about strategic planning? Do you feel really terrible? Like, I really don't want to do this. I hate doing it. Why are we talking about this? To, oh my gosh, it's my favorite thing. I love it. If you're like me, you're on that right side. You really like it. Or sort of like, meh, somewhere in the middle. I'm not really sure how I feel about it. And it's wherever you are is okay. We honor all feelings and opinions about strategic planning. So some folks are right behind the sad face. They're hiding their stars behind the sad face. But it looks like, you know, neutral to positive for the most part. There's a few folks that really dislike it. So that's okay. It is hard work. It's difficult to do, and sometimes when you're trying to get the work done, which you all are obviously doing all the time, it feels like this is not what we should be spending our time on. But it is an exciting time to take a step back and think about what it is you're trying to do together and how it all adds up to something larger. So I will stop sharing that. Thank you for sharing some of those experiences and feelings. And I think, Tamara, you need to share the other slides.
Yeah.
All right.
Oops, I didn't share that. Sorry, I thought that's what we were going to share. Let's see. Okay. Oh, sorry about that, folks. I'm going to actually take you and have you go from the beginning of that. My apologies, everyone.
All
Here
good,
we
all
go. There we go.
Could be great.
And I think I can pass that back over to you in just a second, Karen. Let's see. There you go. Good. Do you have it now, Karen?
Yeah, I think so. Let's see. There we go. All right. So thanks again for that. As I said, I'm delighted to be here with you today and to be working with you over the next several months, working on an update to the strategic plan. So the basic idea here is that we're going to work together to update the plan from 2013, which was over in 2017. We're going to think about things like, how is it going? How did the plan work for you? What has changed since then? The plan is an opportunity to focus the work, given you've such a large mandate and such a large geography. And so how do you use limited resources to focus the work in a way that's going to be most impactful for the people who are participating? It's an opportunity to discuss the partnership structure, right? So one of the things I'll talk about in a moment is how the partnership has changed over time. Brian and Becca were reflecting on 20 years of work and how partnership has changed over that time. So what are the right ways for you to work together? Are there more formal ways you might work together? What is the best way? What's going to work for the partners, different kinds of partners? There's going to be a strategic planning committee, which I'll talk about in a few slides. That's going to help guide the plan overall. But also there's going to be a lot more opportunity for partner input throughout. So we're going to do a survey with partners. There's going to be some meetings where partners participate, and then of course partners will have an opportunity to review the drafts as they come out. So strategic planning committee is still kind of being formed as we speak. That should be finalized in the next week or so. Thinking about a geographic distribution, experience with the Adirondack Invasive Plant Program, making sure there's balance with aquatic and terrestrial expertise and experience, of course, a willingness to serve. And these meetings, because we have a fairly short time frame, are going to start the week after Thanksgiving. So here is a fabulous slide that Brian helped create, and thank you so much. It's much prettier than if I had done this myself, so thank you, to give a broad overview of what the process is going to be. So we are just at the beginning of November here. So what we've done so far is sort of clarify the objectives amongst the APIPP staff. In a meeting in September, we've done partner interviews. I think there's about 30. I forgot to count beforehand, but there's I talked to maybe a dozen people, and APIPP staff talked to quite a few more. So we heard some initial feedback from some partners. Now we're in the fall partners meeting. Next, the strategic planning committee is going to meet the week after Thanksgiving, and we're going to dive into further stakeholder outreach, getting more feedback from more partners using a survey. We're also going to be thinking about how the virtual planning meetings will play out early next year. There's going to be 3 to 6 meetings on various topics, thinking about all the aspects that can come up, thinking about the structure, thinking about vision, thinking about specific goals, what's different for aquatics and terrestrial, what are we trying to achieve together, how are we going to stay together and connect effectively. From there will be some kind of draft plan that then the strategic planning committee is going to take a look at and make sure it's ready for full partner review. And there will be, I'm sure, many discussions and refinements as that comes out, as people share their thoughts. And the idea is by the spring partner meeting that there'll be a solid draft in place, and there'll be some draft metric dashboards so that it's easy for all partners to see what's happening in as far as progress to the plan. And then if there's additional meetings needed to wrap things up, then that's what's going to happen. But the idea is it's going to be all completed by May or so of next year. So with that, I'll pause and see if there's any questions. We'll get back to this slide, and feel free to put questions in the chat as we go along. Okay. So the interviews are, like I said, there was 30. I personally had many fabulous conversations with many of you who were on the call, and it was just, I'll just say it was a really fun experience to hear about how passionate you all are about this work. One of the questions we asked is how could you be more invested in this work? Like what would it take? And almost everybody that I spoke to said, we are really, really invested, and it's hard to imagine what else we could do to be more invested. So people are very committed, and that is an incredible asset to this larger partnership. Some of the other things we've learned are that relationships are foundational. This is something that this partnership started more than 20 years ago, based on relationships and how people connect. And so making sure we're nurturing those relationships over time and continue to find ways to connect in ways that build relationship is important. That's important for the success that you've achieved so far, and it's going to be important for the success in the future, so making space for that. One interesting observation is how much the partnership has changed over time. Right? So it started as an idea, a group of people with great ideas, and then with some seed funding, and then with some more funding, and then with some formal staff and more contracts and lots of structure and formality. And so the way that you interact as a partnership and the goals that you have would also necessarily change over time because of the way that the partnership has changed. So that's an important thing to be thinking about as we update the plan the first time in 8 years. As I said, continue to invest in relationships. That was just so important to so many of you. And then it's important also to remember, and you probably know this well, but the different partners have different needs and interests. So there's you're coming together on one issue, but there's overlapping interests, but not necessarily completely aligned. So part of the plan is thinking about where are you aligned, and how do you move forward with that alignment to have significant outcomes for managing invasive species. Okay, so back to the timeline, just to give you an opportunity to ask any more questions on that. What's happening next is I have to, before Thanksgiving is my goal to go through all the interviews in detail and write up a summary so that we can process that information. It's probably 100 pages of notes at this point to condense it down into something a little more digestible, and that's going to inform the strategic planning committee's work, thinking about who to reach out to in the next phase of stakeholder outreach, what kind of questions to be asking, what the structure is for the meetings, what conversations need to be had, who needs to be part of different kinds of conversations, how do we set it up to make it easy for people to participate, how do we set it up for people to participate who can't. So those kinds of questions, just kind of the structure, how it all works. Any questions so far? All right. Well, that's all I've got. That's all I've got, actually. Look, I rarely am done early. So Tamara, if there's anything you want to add, or any of the other staff who are participating, or any of the people I spoke to in interviews, I'd love to you to chime in.
Thanks, Karen. That is great. I'm going to show just a couple more slides, and then we do have about 10 minutes, I think, for questions. As I mentioned earlier, when I put up the agenda, We would love to do about 10 minutes of question and answer. That can be for Becca or for Brian or for Karen, or actually anybody else who's on the phone. And then we will take a break at 10:40. We do have great slides from our partners we'll be showing during that break, and we'll pick it back up again at 10:50. I did want to, if I can get my screen to work. There we go. Before I do have 2 slides, and then I'm going to turn off the slides and go back to gallery view. But in terms of what's next, I think some of you have already seen the plugs for Uninvited, which is a new documentary that has come out from DEC. I have not seen it yet, but the trailer is awesome. And thanks to Emily Bell working with the prisons across the state, we are going to have a watch party tomorrow at noon. So grab your lunch, grab some popcorn, and join us for that. And then, as I mentioned, we will be having our roundtables that we did last year, all via Zoom, but a chance for all of you to talk with each other, more talking, less listening, I hope, on February 8th and February 10th. So with that, before we go into the break, I'm going to stop share. I'm going to, you can chime in with any questions you have. Becca, I'm going to kick us off with one that was in the chat because somebody wanted to know how you actually treat Tree of Heaven. You're welcome to post some questions in the chat or to go off mute and actually ask a question or provide an observation. So Becca, just a quick question. How do you treat that Tree of Heaven?
So we treated Tree of Heaven with a combination of some chemical treatment methods using a glyphosate-based product. So depending on the size of the tree in question, we either use the stump method, there, or hack and squirt. I do want to note that the species does respond pretty vigorously when it is damaged via root sucker, so that's something to be aware of.
I would say that this year too, that there was one very large Tree of Heaven, and APIPP was able to use some of the funding that we have available to help that private landowner and to hire an arborist to take down that tree. We are very worried about Tree of Heaven because it is the alternate host for spotted lanternfly. And as Becca said, we have fewer than 10 sites in the Adirondacks, and we want to keep it that way. Other questions for Becca or Brian or observations that you want to offer? Doesn't sound like it. I think I'll make the decision that we can take a 20-minute break rather than a 10-minute break, because that's a nice opportunity to be able to get a cup of coffee, to be able to check your email in between, and we will come back at 10:50. I am going